Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our Only Murders in the Building Season 3, Episode 7 review and reaction. This episode is titled Cobra. This is the most action that Cobras have had on any TV show since Cobra Kai went off the air for a little while. Still miss that.
Oh my goodness, this is one of my most favorite episodes. It was so good. Of course, Matthew Broderick, we had Theo back.
Yeah,
Listen, Theo, I know you're watching this video. Stop helping Robert Tobert. Don't give him notes helping with Mabel. Don't compliment his eyes. We're rooting for you to be with Mabel, not Robert Tobert. So stop that.
I love Theo. I love
I
Theo so
love
much.
him. And oh my goodness, I love that she also has learned ASL to be able to communicate with him better.
Yeah, there's such a sweetness to those characters, and I know we haven't seen Theo all season. I know we're not seeing Teddy all season. Nathan Lane actually doing Broadway.
We did see him briefly, though, in that Uma whole sequence where she's stealing everything and she goes to her closet. If you look right at the back, there's
Yeah,
like a giant painting portrait of him, Teddy, in the background, kind of hidden with her clothes.
we have a lot of different questions to obviously dive into here, but just from the jump, Uma, why do you want a bloody handkerchief? Like, if I'm just, I know you like to take things. I know things are kind of your thing, as you explained to us. You don't want to use that. There's blood on it. Like, what's wrong with you?
Listen, that whole thing with Uma and her basically saying, "Oh man, seeing Bunny again." Oh
Yeah,
my goodness. Listen, her whole sort of speech about people going in and out of her life and that, things don't leave you, but people often do. And we've seen that with Charles too, where kind of people have been in and out of his life throughout his life, that he'd been kind of dealing with that as well before being part of the trio. But of course, he was broken up with them at that point. Having Seeing the two of them together and actually just like talking and at the diner and whatever, I was like, there's something here with this. I don't think the show is going to explore it. But if he ended up with Uma and Uma with him, this feels like a pairing that's very real that would go the distance.
they have a very good comedic chemistry. Like,
Yeah, they
I
do.
like where he's like talking about President McKinley, and then he's trying to clarify it, and she's just so deadpan in response. There was a lot of really good nostalgia, but there's also a lot of really good mystery within this episode, and
Yep.
we have so much to talk about when it comes to Dickie. But before we do, be sure to join our Patreon. We have a link in the description below. Every week we do a live stream over there talking all about Only Murders in the Building. It is a lot of fun. There's a lot of theories kind of bouncing in every direction. And thank you to everyone who has joined and been a part of these discussions so far.
Yeah, it really helps support the channel by joining our Patreon. And yeah, we had a really fun live last night talking about Only Murders and all the theories.
Okay.
It was a good time.
Here's just the big question for, we'll get into it. And of course, we're curious what you guys have to say about this in the comments.
Yeah.
What matters the most with the show like this? Is it that we have a powerful emotional story that is sort of laid out through a lot of the season? Or is it better to have something that's very surprising at the last second? Because it just doesn't feel like there are a ton of clear suspects that are on the show right now.
No, there really isn't. And I mean, to be honest, there really hasn't been this season. I know they tried to circle Kimber and Joy, and we all knew that that wasn't really where it was going. But
Yeah,
they've done this in past seasons as well, where they've given us people where we're kind of like, we know it's not them, because
yeah.
it's usually this episode where it starts to really come together. 7, 8, 9, you're starting to like really get like big clues, big reveals, things that are tied in with what happened, which is what happened in this episode. We got some big reveals about Dickie, where he has now said on the show that he is adopted. It is something that a lot of people had been speculating about. He has now said it on the show that
Yeah.
he was adopted. And then after he was adopted, his parents got pregnant with Ben. And then Ben became like the child that was promised. And,
Yeah.
he ended up taking all these things away from Dickie, including Cobro, all his ideas. He became really big, famous, and Dickie was sort of left in the background. So tinfoil hat.
All right.
We've been talking a bit about this season, that Loretta is actually his birth mother. It hasn't been revealed on the show yet, but she has this scrapbook, has a ton of pictures of Ben in it with Dickie in the background, which, makes sense because that's how Dickie has felt, in the background.
Yes.
Now we have this situation where Dickie is selling off everything that's related to Cobro and his brother. But then he's going to buy that hanky from Uma that has his brother's blood on it. It's like, okay, if you're going to be selling off everything that belongs to Ben, then why are you going to be buying this piece of, your brother that he had on him with his blood on it when he died? There's not that many reasons for it. He's not buying it for sentimental, remember when my brother got murdered. That's not what's happening here. He's buying it because either he's involved in this murder and he doesn't, obviously want it to come back to him. He wants to hide it. Or he knows who did it and he doesn't want anything to happen to them. So is it him that's involved, or is it someone like Loretta who's involved? I know that the show has been like, oh, we already did the female murderer. Ha ha ha. We're not going to do that again, which might just be the red herring to be like, of course it's not a woman. Look over here. But it's actually going to be Loretta.
I will say this. It makes a certain sense that it's Loretta if you want to just give Meryl Streep the best material possible. I mean, that's, if you're making this season so that you could just really have knock it out of the park performances more than anything else, like that is sort of the perfect end setup here. If she thinks that Dickie is being mistreated or that, he's not getting credit for anything out there, it fundamentally, it makes a lot of sense that Dickie would then do everything he could to protect her. I think the clear takeaway, I mean, regardless of where you feel about Dickie, about whether or not he's the killer, about how do you not say at this point, he does not want this case to be resolved? Like, that to me is the most obvious thing. Like, why does he not want the case to be resolved? Maybe there's some debate there. Maybe he thinks it's easier if they just think, okay, Greg already did it, Greg's in custody, and this just have it be that. Or he's worried that somebody he cares about is involved in it in some sort of shape or form. Or he's worried that certain things will come back to him. I mean, he's clearly given so many different things away, and yet here he's willing to spend money on this handkerchief. But I do kind of wonder, it's already been sort of tipped off that, people up in that, Cobro suite or whatever we want to call it, that somebody up there bought the handkerchief. Like, aren't some people going to put it together that Dickie bought it?
Yeah, I mean, that should be something that will come out, I think. I mean, Mabel's figured some other stuff out through her conversations with Dickie. And, I was actually really glad that they had that beginning conversation where she started trying to, pick information about Ben, and Dickie just called it out to just be like, come on, like, my brother is dead and you're here just like, I don't want to help you with your podcast or like to try to like profit off of my brother's death. Like, stop. And, they don't really talk about that on this show or a lot of other shows that have podcasts or whatever that are talking about this type of material.
There's something very, very cynical about Dickie underneath all of this, where he clearly has some sort of sentiment towards his brother. I don't think he would have said what you just said that, he said to Mabel otherwise. Like, I think he does care a little bit about his brother's quote unquote legacy or whatever it may be. But at the same time, he's also sitting here willingly profiting on everything his brother ever had. And so he is really hypocritical, where I think he wants to control whatever narrative is out there
Yeah.
about Ben.
That's what I think it really is, that he was trying to shut down Mabel so that she won't do this podcast, she won't dig deeper. But he gave a little bit too much information. He gave some information where Ben always likes to be fashionably late, so
Yeah.
he's got his watch set back 20 minutes. So that the timing was off with Greg, as it turns out, and now Greg is going to be free. He is no longer the main suspect.
The big fun that comes out of this particular takeaway is just that the police are now going to be more involved again, which... Great, let's have more people come in here and disrupt the investigation and probably have things go a little bit haywire.
Right.
Okay, so this is just sort of the bigger overarching thing that I'm kind of just stuck on right now, is that this episode, you've already mapped out Dickie, Loretta, the possibility that Dickie is her biological son, which I think is pretty likely at this point. Is it all too clear right now? Because we still have 3 episodes to go, and it might be an instance of, okay, all of us as viewers are ahead of where the characters are, and maybe over the next couple of episodes they'll start to figure this out, or maybe Oliver will try to protect Loretta. The thing that I'm just still wondering about is there going to be a little bit of room left for some sort of big surprise we don't see coming over these next few episodes, where there is another suspect who could surface, who could still make some element of sense. Like, I know I've brought up Cliff as the murderer a lot, and it doesn't have to be Cliff. Like, I'll just make that clear. It could be a lot of other people still, because there are unanswered questions. Why was that not the dressing room, why was Katie's office locked?
Yeah, and my tinfoil hat theory has been that when we saw the fight with Ben and Loretta, and then he got punched with, by Charles, that he went to the stage manager and they were in there talking, where he was like, I just got punched by one of my coworkers. Like, this is not okay. I'm about to go on stage. My coworker is punching me in the face. Like, this is my work environment. Like, you're the stage manager. You need to do something about this. I think that makes the most sense. Of course, he's going to go to the stage manager and be like, this is not okay.
I think the other thing I'm really, really curious about right now is the murder at the Arconia, like the actual murder. If we want to say that that's Dickie, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that may very well be the case at this point.
Yeah, especially with the phone call. They brought that up again, that Dickie's the person who told Ben that there was a phone call, and then they left the apartment and everyone else was still there. So there's not that many suspects of people who would have been with him at that time. Probably Robert Tobert, who's filming it, and Dickie, who was like, hey, let's leave the apartment, you have a phone call.
Yeah, it would have to take like some like real super, I don't know, secret agent level espionage to like have somebody sneak up there, find a way up there, plan it all so that nobody sees them.
Here's the biggest thing for me is, like, this season has felt like it's been a really sad season. Like, there's been a lot of like really sort of heartbreaking things that have been happening. It's been very emotional season, and it feels like it's been more about that aspect than it has been sort of about the laughs or the comedy, even though your boy Cliff came in and gave me one of the biggest laughs with his stress dancing and stress pirouettes. He was on fire. This episode was so funny.
I really didn't see it coming. And the moment he went into a pirouette in the middle, I just burst out laughing. I was like, what's wrong with this guy? He's so weird. I almost just want to say he's the killer just for that reason.
Well, that's the thing, is like, are we going to get some big surprise at the end of the season where it's like, it was Cliff all along, it was Donna, it was KT, we're going to bring back Kimber, who we haven't seen in a million episodes. Like, is it going to be somebody where there hasn't really been any real smoke around them being the killer, and they're going to reveal it in the last 3 episodes? Like, for me, it would be really unsatisfying, because one of the things that this show does differently than other shows who like these big surprises, you are never going to figure it out, ha ha ha, is that this show gives you enough that you can figure it out. And there's been some characters that we've seen, like Donna or Cliff or Katie, where we haven't seen them. Like, where's Cliff been? You know, he pirouetted into this episode, but we haven't seen him in a really long time. And there hasn't even been any talk about him. There's just been like nothing. So for me, if we get into these last few episodes and all of a sudden it's going to be like, it's Cliff. Here's this huge story of, you know, he was, you know, Ben's lover, and all of this is just coming out of nowhere. For me, I'm going to have the disappointment. You know, it's just going to be like, we all, you know, get a chance to really figure things out and not go and look back and be like, oh, I missed this or that. Cliff has been a ghost. And after watching him in this episode, I do have to say, I wish that they had used him more. Like, his comedic, like, timing on things is like a 10 out of 10. He's so funny.
He is a great character, like, regardless of if he is the killer or not. Like, I think Cliff is like the MVP of like sort of the supporting recurring cast this season. I think he's really great. He's really interesting. Like, I'm getting very worried about my, you know, Cliff is the killer theory because of this just like love story gone awry with Ben. I mean, anything is theoretically still possible, but the thing is just that
it's not on the show at this point.
There needs to start being some movement in that direction, or if it's any other, you know, killer that's sort of a fringe theory that is sort of out there. Like, we need to start getting a little bit of movement, and it doesn't have to be big and dramatic, but just something where at the very least in episode 8 and episode 9 we're starting to move in a certain direction. Like, I think it's okay to have a little bit of a surprise, but it has to make sense within the world of this show. And I think that's the most important thing here, is that when you have the killer reveal, you need to be able to understand why they did it and how they did it. Like, this to me is still the biggest problem I have with season 2, where I just felt like the whole Poppy storyline was a little too hard to explain. And I don't think the emotional payoff with Poppy being the killer of Bunny was that great.
No, the motivation just wasn't enough. But I will say that at least there were enough clues there that she could have had some sort of involvement. We had a huge Poppy episode fairly early on. It was like episode 4 or 5 or something like that. She was in the very first episode, standing in front of the Arconia when the trio was being brought out. I mean, why is she there? She doesn't live there. She's not in the neighborhood. She wouldn't know that they were being pulled out of there unless she was involved. So they definitely had given us early enough clues that we could have figured it out. But yeah, for me, the payoff of what her motivation was kind of like, Bunny, like, why? Like, okay, I guess we're here now. But this is starting to feel like they're setting up for a big emotional payoff if it does involve sort of family dynamics, if that's the way that it's going to go.
Oh man, my tinfoil hat is glowing.
Oh.
There's something that has just come into my head. I just had a light bulb, everybody.
All right.
Okay, this light bulb may be like going on and off and on and off. We'll see. Okay, I just thought about this. How premeditated was all of this? Obviously, what happened at the Arconia, it seems pretty impulsive, like, you know.
Yeah.
But what happened at the Gooseberry Theater was the argument that happened with Charles and Loretta and Ben. Is that, I don't want to say it's a red herring, because it might still be Loretta who's deeply involved in this and Dickie who's deeply involved in this. But all of this started to come into my head when I was thinking, why kill Ben now? Because whoever did whatever they did, if it's to the cookies or whatever else to give him an allergic reaction, a poisoning, whatever. I mean, they brought up the tox screen again in this episode, but whatever that is, you can't just be at the last minute, oh, let me just, make sure these cookies are ready for you. It's like they had to have planned
Yes.
for that to have been the instance in which that happen.
Yeah.
So why do it then? Why do it on the opening night of Ben's show? Like, you wanted this to be a very big spectacle. You wanted something like this to happen on the during the show. So
Yes.
the big question that comes into my mind with all of this then is, why would you want this to happen now? And that may be where, your Dickie idea comes in, where this is a very dramatic way for somebody to die, and that generates a ton of publicity.
Yeah, and it's also just very personal that if, let's say, Loretta is Dickie's mom and, Dickie has felt this way his whole life. Oh, I'm second best. He took my ideas. He's become really famous. Okay, I guess I'm just in the background. Then in comes Loretta gassing him up, being like, you shouldn't be in the background. You're the star. He then gets this parental figure that he's always wanted. His biological mother has come back into his life, gassing him up. Yeah, I should be, front and center. He's always been like, I'm helping. He even said it. I make sure that his reputation is perfect all the time. I cover up everything for him so that he's always looks like, the star that he is, sort of thing. This then makes sense to show him in a light that he isn't covering up anymore, to be like, you know what? I'm going to show everything. I'm just going to have him, die in this dramatic way in front of the world. It feels very personal.
This is the trick that I now believe the show is playing on us. We saw the very start of the play when everybody first came together. We've seen a lot of opening night. The time in the middle is the time that matters here. This is something that clearly could not have been thought of at the last minute, that they're going to do this to Ben. Like, it had to have been planned in the days leading up to it, and we have not seen any of that.
Okay, we need to talk about Matthew Broderick. Listen, we're 21 minutes in yet. I'm just like, I'm sitting in my seat being
all
like,
right.
Oh my goodness.
Let's have it.
He was so funny. The way that they had put this character together, because this is, Matthew Broderick's not like this, but the idea that they've made him into like this Jeremy Strong character where he's like this crazy method actor and he's just so irritating to work with, that if you give him just a little bit, he's gonna push it to really get to know this character. I was playing this one character where, I end up taking a job as a high school teacher and dated all my students. I just about died. That was like the second funniest thing outside of doing a pirouette out of stress. It was so funny. Like, he played this so well. They brought up all the things. It felt like they were actually trying to explain to the audience, if you don't know who Matthew Broderick was, they said his name 100 times. They said Ferris Bueller 100 times. Like, it's such an iconic character. He looks the same. Like, I didn't think they needed to really like pound that he was Ferris Bueller, but it was a funny moment that Charles is basically like, you stole Ferris Bueller from me. You were 41.
That was my third favorite, funniest moment of the episode. That also made me laugh a lot. Like, I've already made it clear, like, I don't really care for the Patter song this season. I've heard enough about the Pickwick triplets who did it for my entire lifetime, but Broderick is just, he's so fun. I love that he was so game to come in and do this. I also love that this brought us Mel freaking Brooks. Like, that
I know.
I did not know that cameo was coming at all. And obviously they kept that a secret on purpose. Mel Brooks is like, in his late 90s, and he is still ridiculously funny. That whole conversation where he basically told Oliver, you can't let Broderick have any sort of creative control, because then this happens. Broderick's keeping you up all night. This changes everything now that I know he's from New York. Now we have to do this. Get back to the piano. We're not done.
Oh, that was so good. And it was nice to see that Matthew Broderick was the whole reason that Oliver and Charles got back together, drinking their gut milk and having this moment of, apology together, where Matthew Broderick still doesn't get it. And he's still just standing in the door and being like, okay, so I'll see you at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
It was this was as good of like a one-off appearance we've seen from anybody in this world. I mean, I love Broderick so much. It was really fun to have him. Now,
Okay, we also have to talk about this theory that's been out there that Robert Tobert has been brought into Mabel's life by Cinda. There
yeah,
has been this theory floating around, and it got some legs in this episode. So we saw that Mabel was like, okay, I've got this new clues. I'm going to start the podcast. I need a new name. We know that Cinda had already tried to offer up Bloody Mabel, and she was like, no,
yeah,
no. And then when she says that to Tobert, Tobert's like already has like a printout of her with a knife in her mouth, Bloody Mabel, and she's just like, "What? No." And I was just like, "Ah,
yeah,
okay, there's the connection," because Robert Tobert didn't know who Mabel was like when they first met, allegedly.
yeah.
He was acting like he had never heard really the podcast. He didn't really know who she was. And now all of a sudden he knows Bloody Mabel and this and that. And you could make the argument, well, they're dating, so maybe he's gotten to know her. But Theo gives him that note to just be like, yeah, I can't sort of get through to her either. I can't really get close to her either. Makes it tell me that, Robert Tobert is not that close to her, not as close to her, that he would maybe know all of that. Maybe.
Tobert has been put in a very interesting place on this show where I don't know at this point how you can look at him and be like, okay, he's not involved in a lot of this in one way or another. Either this theory that he's working with Cinda is correct, or he's
Maybe.
involved somehow in the murder is correct, or
Maybe.
he's just an opportunist and he's just trying to take advantage of this situation because he sees money.
I think that's true.
Documentarians don't make $1 billion here, everybody, unless you're like Sir David Attenborough or like, I don't know, in like the top 1% of people in this field. You're looking for another way to get on top. And I think Tobert clearly sees this is a big name celebrity case.
Mhm.
This is somebody who has had a certain level of success, regardless of, who he's tied to or what the reason is. Like, he wants to get at this. It does, though, lead to me the biggest question that I have for Mabel after all of this. I mean, we can talk about, where she's living now because apparently she's moved out of the Arconia, but is it okay? I mean, she's doing the same named podcast without Oliver and Charles. Like,
Mhm.
that's no bueno. Like, that's really bad. Like, it's just, you're basically being like, you guys were a part of this property. Well, you guys can just go pound sand. I'm going to do the same show without you. I'm not telling you. You guys technically have an ownership of this show as well. Like, I would be really mad.
Yeah, and they should be mad, but at the same time, they made their choice,
Yeah, they
man.
did,
Like, so
but
what? Because they decide to leave the podcast and she all of a sudden doesn't have a say in the podcast anymore. Like, I was glad that she kept it the same. I was worried that she was going to change the name and that it was going to be something else and it wasn't going to be Only Murders anymore. And it was, I think, the thing that Charles and Oliver needed to kind of get that kick in the butt to come back. Like, Oliver knows that he stepped the line with Mabel. He owes her a real apology for that whole basically like
yeah.
get a real job, get your life together, that sort of thing. But I think it's the motivation that they need to really miss it, to be like, oh, she's going on without us. Oh, we're not part of this anymore. Oh, I don't like this.
They need to start episode 8 with just telling us where Mabel is. Like, if they don't tell us where Mabel moved, it is going to bother me the rest of the season.
I think she's living with Tobert. If I have to put it out
Nope.
there, I was like, I hoped that maybe she'd be with Theo because they're friends, and
Yeah.
maybe her and Tobert aren't at that stage yet. They've only been dating for 4 weeks. That
Yeah.
maybe Tobert was going to be like, it's a little soon. But if she's lost her place, I mean, they're dating. Maybe he's like, you know what? It's fast, but I like you, and I have ulterior motives. So move on in.
The worst case scenario is that like she's gone to Cinda and Cinda's like, I'll put you up somewhere.
Ooh.
And then it's just like, then she's like stuck having to do things for Cinda.
I
But
know.
we'll see. We only have a few episodes left, but
I
we will
know.
have a preview for what's coming up on Only Murders very, very soon.
Yep.
So hit that subscribe button. Also join our Patreon, weekly live streams, all about Only Murders. We got a link in the description, and we'll see you guys next time.